Hello, hi, how are you? This is Coach Aaron Saft and the Running is Life podcast. And today we're going to take a deep dive into some training. Now, this comes from multiple sources, okay? So when I go through this, we're talking about my experience, things I've learned, things I am learning. This is a combination of multiple things. So this comes from multiple sources, and I'll try to put those sources in the show notes. There is a lot here, so I am going to try to build out the show notes with a lot of this information, just so you're not trying to remember it or scratch something down. Like I said, I'll try to put my notes into the show notes, so you have those for your own training purposes. But this episode, I'm going to take a deep dive into training yourself for uphill races. Now I know that's very specific, but a lot of these principles can be applied to other races as well. So there's a lot of information here that you can apply to your training, whether it is uphill or if it's completely flat. Some of the stuff that we'll talk about, you just obviously replicate what we're doing, but on a flat surface, and build from there. There's a lot here. I'm not sure I can cover it all in one episode. We'll see how this goes. But a lot of this stemmed from my December training. So going back to December, I was getting ready. I needed a qualifier for the Ouray 100, and I wanted to kind of get in some climbing, but obviously with doing the calendar challenge, I was building some massive miles. So very difficult to do a ton of vert and a ton of miles and still recover based on the amount of volume that I was doing. And so, I could tell, by the end, I really wasn't recovering, and we'll kind of talk about that as well as we get into this. But I took a lot away from it, because once I did give my body the rest it needed, the Fierce Dragon 100K was probably one of the best races I've had in a very long time. 17,000 feet of climbing over 100K, roughly 62 miles, and the climbing felt so effortless, easy. And same with the distance. And that's all thanks to things I was doing in the month of December. And that didn't require me to do a lot of vertical training. If you go back to my Strava data and look at the runs, I did long, sustained climbing at a very specific heart rate. And we're going to kind of talk about that. And that's what you'll see me out there doing right now, is rebuilding my capacity to climb for long periods of time. If you go to my run on Sunday, you can see I spent about roughly 7 miles of climbing, and at a very specific heart rate target. So we're going to talk about all of that as well. So just getting used to, that basic grind is what it is. And, we're going to talk about how to start and how to get after it. So it all comes down to, what do you have access to? What is your training grounds, right? I am fortunate enough to live in an area where I have these long climbs. The climb that I just spoke about, it takes me roughly 2 3/4 of a mile to get to that climb. And that's, right out my front door. So I'm fortunate enough to have these climbs around me. Now, having a climb that's, about 40 minutes in length, roughly maybe 3 miles, is ideal. That's great. That's what we're looking for. If you live in a flatter area and don't have access to these type of climbs, having access to a treadmill is wonderful. If you don't have access to a treadmill, then having a parking garage or stairs is your next best option in order to train for something like this. Now, is it to say that you need all of this in order to complete a mountain race? No. There are those that come from completely flat areas. They have, a short bridge, and that's the only incline that they have access to, and they use that repetitively, and still have success at finishing these races. So when I said all of that, it's based on what you have. But what I'm going to focus on is the ability to access a long climb. Again, 40 minutes, 3-ish miles, or using a treadmill at incline. Now there's different workouts within doing whichever location you choose to use, be it outside or on a treadmill. There's running up these long climbs, right? There's walking at incline. The walking at incline. It's probably best to do those on a treadmill, and we'll kind of talk about why. And then there's the addition of adding weight to it, using a weighted vest or a ruck pack. And then there's the intensity at which you do it, right? So let's kind of differentiate the thing based on the intensity. So if I'm doing a long running climb, now you're going to start out at a shallower grade, right? So at an incline that's sustainable for you to be able to run at. Now, we're going to talk about the differences in using pace versus heart rate. You need some metric to kind of track this, right? So we need to know what the effort is and how we're going to do this. What's the heart rate? What's the pace at which to do these? That's going to provide that effort that we're looking for. So there is a metric that you need to track and be able to use in order to do these. So when we look at the efforts, right? So let's just crack into that right away, because we can't really talk about doing these without knowing at what effort to do them. If you're going to look at heart rate, okay, you need to know what your max heart rate is, and we need to have something reliable to measure that heart rate. Now, my number one pick is a chest strap. My favorite is the Wahoo. The Wahoo system. It's a rechargeable. It's the most accurate. It's the most comfortable for me. I'll put the Wahoo in the show notes, so you can find that in the show notes and see if that's something that's more suitable for you. Others are, I would say, using the armband. That's probably number 2 right now. Now, keeping in mind that the armband is using an optical technology. The optical technology is the same technology that's used in most wristwatches to track heart rate. So optical is it's getting better for sure. And the reason the armbands are a little more successful than the wrist is there's less movement in that bicep position where you put the armband. Now, what I'm observing through my runners that use the armband is that if it's not positioned correctly, and I was using the armband to experiment a bit myself, if it is not in the correct position, you're not going to get a good reading. All of a sudden, it's going to start reading low or very high. Okay, so if you're noticing that on your armband, reposition it, tighten it. Okay, make sure it's in the correct position and you're getting an accurate reading. All right. And then thirdly, obviously your wristwatch. Now with the wristwatch, again, you're going to get movement. Now the optical sensor is it's basically reading the pulse rate that it sees within under the epidermal layer, right? It's tracking that blood flow. It's watching how fast it's pumping, right? So if that watch isn't tight enough, again, you're not going to get an accurate reading. So again, kind of fix your watch. You're going to have to kind of tighten it up to make sure that it stays in position. That can be extremely uncomfortable. So again, think about what you're most comfortable with, right? And the accuracy at which you're getting it. So with that said, there's a few different ways to kind of determine your zones here. Okay, so one, that some are going by is the Maffetone test. Okay, and not even a test, the Maffetone equation. And the Maffetone equation is simply 180 minus your age. Now, there's a few variables that you can add or subtract beats from your your answer, and I'm going to put that in the show notes so you can see, not only the equation but also how the maffetone is how the maffetone equation is used. Okay, so that will be in the show notes. Secondly, there's also just a simple other calculation that you can do. Again, I'll put that in the show notes, and that equation is 207 minus 0.7 times your age. So you would go 0.7 times your age and then subtract that from 207, and that would give you your maximum heart rate. You can also do a maximum heart rate test, and I will put that test in the show notes. But what that would look like is and since we're doing hills, you're going to use hills here to do this. You would get a 15-minute warm-up, including some fast strides, because you're going to be doing some very hard efforts here. So then afterwards, you're going to find a hill that takes approximately 2 to 3 minutes to climb at a hard pace that you could hold for 20 minutes and then jog down to recover. On the second hill, you're going to run up faster, a pace you could hold for approximately 2 miles. Here, your maximum heart rate is likely about 10 beats higher than what you see. Jog down. On your third hill repeat, run up as fast as possible, going all out for the final about 100 meters, and you should reach your peak heart rate there. So then you would dive back into whatever you upload to, be it Strava, Training Peaks, Garmin Connect, Coros, whatever app you have, to find what did you reach. Okay, what heart rate did you reach? There's also a 10-minute time trial method. I'll put that in the show notes. But doing these 3 hill peaks successively a little bit faster, with the last one being all out, you should be able to reach that maximum heart rate. Okay, that's what we're looking to determine. So from there, now you're going to set up your zones. Okay, so based off of whatever you use, the maffetone principle, the maximum heart rate equation, or the maximum heart rate test, I recommend the test to give you a little bit more accurate feedback. You can even run the test twice just to make sure. But again, make sure you're adequately warmed up with a good jog, strides, and then getting into that workout. But what we're looking at is then from your maximum heart rate, we're looking at a recovery zone of 60 to 69% of maximum heart rate, an endurance running zone of 70 to 78% of maximum heart rate, and a threshold or tempo zone of 80 to 87% of maximum heart rate. Okay. Now your anaerobic, your highest zone is going to be 90 to 100% of maximum heart rate. Okay. Just to set your zones properly. So you can do those calculations on your own and know precisely what you're looking for. Okay, so that's determining maximum heart rate and setting up your zones based on that. Again, I'm going to put a ton of notes into the show notes so that you have all of this information to go through and determine what your zones should be. Now, if you're interested in using pace as a determinant, okay, I would suggest doing a threshold pace test. Okay, now, number of ways to do this. You can use a solid 60-minute race. So if you race for 60 minutes, be it 10K to half marathon, you can take your average pace from that 60 minutes and determine what your threshold pace is, okay? Or you can do a workout and, again, start with a proper warm-up, 15 to 20 minutes of easy jogging, and then do probably 4 strides. I like to have those a little bit faster to get the heart pumping and get you primed and ready for your test here. And then you would do a 30-minute time trial. Okay. Now, just like we did, I'm going to put this caveat in there, just like we did with hill repeats, in order to get that maximum heart rate, in your threshold test, you need to do this at the incline in which you'll be working out. So if you are going to use a long hill, I would do this test on that long hill so that you get accurate results of what paces are at threshold, right? Now, that 30-minute test, you're going to run the fastest pace you can for those 30 minutes, okay? You don't want to slow down, all right? I mean, if it happens, it happens. Again, you can do this test twice if need be, but we're trying to determine what pace you could sustain uphill for that 30 minutes. If you're doing it on a treadmill, what are you going to work out at? Are you going to work out at 8%? Are you going to work out at 10%? Again, you could do tests for each incline percentage, but know that each percentage is going to yield a different result. Okay, so keep that in mind when doing these tests, especially the threshold pace test. So, when you've done your 30 minutes of this uphill running, then you're going to look to see what was your average pace across that 30 minutes. You can go into your, hopefully into your whatever it is, your Garmin or whatever. I would set this up as its own workout, right? Because then in your this 30 minutes, I would just create a segment of your workout. In other words, have an upload of only this 30 minutes so that you can take this information and find out what that average pace is during that effort, right? That pace will then become your threshold pace, all right? Now, based off of that threshold pace, we've now created this number, right? This time, this average pace for your threshold. Now, based off of that pace, we're going to say that your recovery zone is 56 to 70% of that pace. All right? So you're going to do your calculations and determine what is 56 to 70%, and that is your recovery zone. Your endurance zone is going to be 71 to 77%. Okay? So again, very close to what we were talking about for maximum heart rate. Now, here's where the variance becomes, because we're talking about threshold pace. That is not your fastest pace. This is your threshold pace, so almost your tempo pace, if you will. So a steady state zone, that would be zone 3, would be 90 to 95%. And your tempo, right, now you were talking your threshold pace, is your 96 to 100%, maybe even a little bit higher, up to 102%. Is your tempo pace, right? That's where we're working for a threshold workout. And then a running interval, zone 5, your anaerobic zone, if you will, is 101 to 120 plus. All right, so you can even go faster if you're doing something that requires that. I have some of my track runners that run faster than that, right? So it just depends on how fast you're going. But that sets up your pace zones. Now you have a pace at which you can run these hills and know, okay, I should be in this range of paces, so that when we do these specific runs with specific intensities, you now have a pace at which okay, at 10%, I should be running within this zone for my endurance, okay? My endurance pace. Again, I'm going to put all of that stuff in the show notes because I know that was a lot of information right there. You've got all sorts of tests and zones here, so lots of information in the show notes. Please, dip over there to check this stuff out, okay? So when we're doing these long running climbs, okay, and as I said, you can see in mine, I use my endurance zone. Okay, so if I'm talking heart rate, again, I'm looking up to 78% of maximum heart rate. Sometimes it's even a little bit lower. I don't like to kind of get to that 78%. I don't like to get that high because it's so easy to go over that. So I give myself a few beats in heart rate. So let's just take, for instance, let's say 135 is my cap, right? That's like the highest heart rate that I want to get. I try not to let my heart rate get over 132. I give myself that little buffer in case there's a change in incline, because I'm doing, these runs outside. The incline does change, and it takes a while to get used to being able to control yourself, to slow down enough when the incline increases, right? If you're on a steady incline, like on the treadmill, for instance, you're probably going to get a little bit of drift over time because obviously we're working harder, we're dehydrating, we're using muscular expenditure, so the heart rate is going to tend to drift a little bit. Even if you're hydrating, you're still going to dehydrate a bit. So you have to keep an eye on that heart rate and make sure that you're hitting that target. Okay. Now, on the pace side of things, again, we're looking in the endurance zone, and you've got a range. Use the same discipline that I was just speaking about. You've got your upper end range of pace, right? Make sure you're staying just below that, right? We don't want to be taxing too much. Again, we don't want to be running at the ceiling of it, because the chances of us going over and out of that zone is too high. Right, so be careful about the pacing that you do in here. So, whether it's heart rate or pacing, we're really looking for using the endurance zone on these long runs. Okay. Again, how long? Start out even shorter, right? So, the body, again, we're going to start at a lower incline, just getting the body used to running at these short inclines, and it may be super slow. In December, when I started this, I was having to walk a lot. Now, it's difficult, right? Because it requires patience in order to do these things. So by heart rate, that's my number one metric. That's what I stick to. I feel it's the most beneficial. I see the most gains from heart rate, and that's why I use it, right? I'm not faulting pace. I don't trust myself in RPE for these workouts. The reason being is it's way too easy to go too hard because you don't feel like you're going that hard, whereas heart rate's going to tell a different story, okay? Abiding by the paces, that's the next best thing. Whereas, like I said, I'm not a big fan of RPE for these type of things. So be cautious. So start out more gradual, kind of work into it. Same on the treadmill. You're going to start out a little bit more gradual, work into it, and not only starting with gradual inclines, but also with duration. I don't want you to just jump into a 40-minute or 3-mile climb. Work up to it, just like you would, anything that we do with running. Build into it. Allow yourself time to get into these longer and longer climbs. I didn't just start with a 7-mile climb on, that Sunday run. I had been building up to that, over a period of time. Again, look through my training. You can see the transition that I kind of built into, at first it may be just, going for a run and then just being able to run, and learn to slow down on short uphills, right? That may be where you're at. Start with where you're at. Start with those short little hill repeats and get used to managing the effort. Okay, controlling your heart rate, controlling the pace, slowing down, having that wherewithal to bring it back down to be within the effort. Okay, that's where the gains are going to be made, is when you are in that zone, right? That's what the improvements will come from. Okay, so be patient with these long climbs, especially with running. It's going to be slow at first. As I said, like when I was doing this in December, I was seeing times on my watch, upwards of 15-minute pace on some of the climbing. Then, it started coming down, and I was in the 14s and then in the 13s, and then I was seeing 12 and even at times 11:30. Now I'm seeing 9:30, right? So it takes time. David Roach is a tremendous example of this when he trained for the Leadville 100. He said, I trained in that endurance zone on Hope Pass. So those of you familiar with the Hope Pass climb, extremely difficult climb at altitude, but he had the patience to build his capacity to run faster and faster paces at the same effort, right? It's incredible. And that's what we're doing here. We're over time building our capacity to run faster paces at the same effort. Okay? So that's what happens when we start incorporating these long climbs. Now, we'll kind of talk about here in just a moment how often you should do this, because this isn't an everyday type of thing. All right, it's not an everyday type of thing. So we'll talk about when to incorporate this and how often. I would incorporate also these long walking climbs, right? So you have these long running climbs. You also have long walking climbs. Now, these, again, in order to control the effort, I would say do these on a treadmill. Now, what drives people nuts is I tell them to do this in the recovery heart rate, and there's a few reasons for this. I usually do this on an easier day. Now, you want those easier days to be in your recovery zones, be it in heart rate or be it in paces. Slow down, right? It's okay. We want to work that low-end system. We want to become more efficient in that low-end system because it improves all the systems above it as well. As crazy as that is, going slower in this recovery zones will improve you across the board. It will make you faster in those other zones, right? Your capacity to climb faster in those upper zones will improve by slowing down. So, is it to say you can't get into the endurance zone on a normal day? For instance, let me just go and give you a for example, okay? And this will get into some of how to program this for yourself. Sunday, as I said, was 20 miles, a lot of climbing and descending. So Monday is a recovery day. All right. I've got this big effort, required a lot of energy on Sunday, 20 miles, plenty of climbing, plenty of descending. Legs need a little bit of recovery. So I did an easy recovery run, and that's at the recovery effort. And, for me, it was 60 to 69% maximum heart rate. Then I followed that with a 15% incline walk with my ruck pack, and we'll talk about using additional weight here in just a moment. But I kept that heart rate, again, in the recovery zone. All right. That's the key, is keeping it low, because it is a recovery day. What's the purpose of the day? It's to recover. Okay. I'm not trying to push here. I'm not trying to get into the endurance zone. That's not recovery. Okay. So kept that in the recovery zone. Then yesterday, I'm recording this on Wednesday. So Tuesday, I had an uphill run. Okay, you'll see if you look at Strava, once again, had about a 3-mile climb. Try to keep that in the endurance zone. Legs felt great on the climb. I was seeing some good paces, and that's great to see. When you've recovered, you're now on Tuesday. Paces are looking good. That's a great sign of recovery, and had a good climb. And then now today, I've got a regular run. Okay, my regular run yesterday was 12 miles. Again, I'm racing this weekend. I shouldn't say I'm racing. I will be participating in the Shamrock races, and I'll do my darndest to do my best. But I'm training through this one, so mileage this week is probably going to be about 80 miles. With that said, 12 miles yesterday, 10 miles today. Today I can keep it in the endurance zone, and then I'm going to do a treadmill hike after the 10 miles. So again, trying to include a little bit more climbing. I've built up the duration at which I'm doing these treadmill hikes. Some of my runners that are less experienced, I'll start them out with just 20 minutes of walking at incline, and it may be at a lower incline, maybe at 8%. Right? I'm up to 15%. I've had plenty of experience, obviously, with doing this. I'm up to 45 minutes of treadmill walking. Now, at the beginning of this cycle, I started out with 30 minutes. I think the incline work is great to include if you are recovering from your workouts. I've had some problems with my hamstring, so I haven't been able to do much beyond the endurance zone, because when I try to push it, my hamstring starts speaking to me. So I've stayed in the endurance zone where my hamstring's just fine. So I've been including the treadmill hiking in the in this phase of training. Usually for a lot of my runners, we start that in 3 cycles before, or 3 blocks before the taper, right? And for us, that's usually long intervals, and then that's followed by maximum volume, and then your taper and race. So in the long interval phase, we're including some treadmill hiking anyway, so this is a good time. I started a little bit earlier just based off of what I'm doing this summer, so it's really individualistic to you and what your race is. How much does it require of you? What type of climbing shape are you in? Are you able to recover from it? So a lot of factors vary into should you be doing these long treadmill climbs. So again, today, 10 miles with treadmill climbing. I usually prescribe 2 to 3 days, 2 days in the long interval. Again, 3 blocks away from the actual goal race. And so 2 during that phase, and then 3 during the maximum volume phase. So what that would look like is, if Monday and Friday are your recovery days, you would be doing treadmill incline walking at recovery zone during those 2 days, and then a third day. So Tuesday and Thursday would probably be medium long volume days, and Wednesday would be a shorter volume day with treadmill hiking. As you become accustomed to the incline, as you progressively get better and more efficient at the incline, now you've got it up to 15% incline. Heart rate isn't as challenged by that. You're seeing your pace is getting better. Then that's when you can add your weighted vest or a rucksack, okay, to those workouts. You're not looking to add a lot, just as we talked about with the duration of time that you're doing and the incline at which you're doing these. You don't want to add a lot too quickly. Allow the body to adapt. Start with a lower weight, and then increase to, the amount of weight that you're carrying. I would say for most runners, we're starting at about 5 to 10% of body weight and working up to 15 to 20% based on your strength and capacity to carry weight. Okay, so those are ancillary pieces that you can add on later. All right, so we've talked about the difference in long running climbs versus long walking climbs. We've talked about now. I will say with the long running climbs, I typically include 2 to 3 days of these, depending on the phase. In the long interval phase, it's going to be my medium long run and my long run. In the max volume phase, typically it's 3 to 4 of the runs. Okay, making sure to kind of recover in between them. I try not to do too many back-to-back days. The way I set up my athletes is typically if they have a long run on Saturday. So if you're one that has to get most of your volume in on the weekends, I set up the long run on Saturday, create the most fatigue in that one with the addition of long climbs, and then on Sunday I would include a medium long run, but that one would be more on rolling hills and more at a recovery effort. Okay, so and then the other two, I would do 2 medium long runs during the week, both of which had these long climbs on it. The descending is a whole other story. Okay, so we'll talk descending at some other time. This, I just want to talk about the uphill portion of this. There is a time and a place for descending. It has a tremendous impact on our races. It does need to be practiced, and we'll talk about frequency and all of that in another episode, perhaps next week. All right. So we have talked about how to determine your efforts, both by heart rate or by pace. We've talked about the zones that at which to go, okay, and how hard you should do each of these. So you've got a lot here so far. It's there. I know I've been throwing a lot of information at you, which I hopefully you've kind of followed along. Now. If we're building these walks in, I started to talk about, how to gradually build these in. Again, starting, we talked a little bit about this. Start with where you're at, right? If you've not had experience with walking at incline, again, start about 20 minutes. If you have had some experience, start at 20 to 25. My more experienced runners, I build them up to an hour of walking at incline. My less experienced runners, I build them up to 30, potentially 40 to 45 minutes, depending on how they're reacting to this. With running, again, start with some simple, just rolling hills to kind of get used to shifting the effort, shifting the pace, shifting the heart rate, right? So, running, start simple, okay, and build into those longer and longer climbs, right? So it's not that you need to be off the bat running 3 miles or 40 minutes. I really caution you at that. Threshold work, again, that's that third block, 3 blocks away from your goal race. Okay, so we're looking at probably a 2-week taper, about 6 weeks in maximum volume for a 100-mile race, maybe 5 weeks for a 50K or a 50 miler. So depending on that's 8 weeks there. Your long interval phase can be anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, so now we're looking at potentially about 12 weeks out to 14 weeks out. Okay, depending on what your experience is with these. A less experienced person can do 4 weeks of threshold work, and if you've never experienced threshold intervals, okay, again, doing these intervals at incline, we're looking at running these at threshold pace or threshold heart rate. Okay, these are great to do on an incline treadmill because of the control that it provides. You have one less variable, right? You're at a constant incline. incline. I would suggest starting that incline at 8%. For those that are more experienced, you could up the incline per interval. Maybe start with your first interval at 8%, second interval at 10%, third interval at 12%. If you're doing 4 or more intervals, again, starting at 8%, maybe 2 at 10%, 1 at 12%, and again, based on your experience, I would say 8 to 12% is kind of your range for these intervals, but I encourage you to do them on a treadmill in order to kind of dial it in. As you become more experienced, more accustomed to controlling that heart rate, you can take it outside. What would these threshold workouts look like? That's a great question. So, for a person that's inexperienced, you can start as simple as 3 by 7 minutes uphill and keep them all at 8%. Right? That's a great way to introduce yourself to these intervals. For a person that's inexperienced, that's going through these this block for the first time, I would keep the volume of intensity at about that, right? So if we're doing 3 by 7 minutes, that's 21 minutes of work. So potentially the next week you do 2 by 10 minutes, 20 minutes of work. Then the third week you do a 20-minute tempo. Okay, that a lot of times we kind of diminish the amount of volume that a person is doing, or the volume of each interval, because we're creating more and more fatigue as time goes on. But I feel that with it only being 20 minutes, I think you're fine in reversing that principle. But for those that are more experienced, maybe it's 4 by 10 minutes. So you got 40 minutes of volume right there. And then, kind of reducing to, maybe 3 by 12 minutes. And again, with those that have more experience, if you're doing 4 by 10 minutes, you could do, the first interval at 8%, second and third at 10%, last interval at 12%. So again, start playing with that. If you're feeling good and recovering, it's never hard, or it's never the wrong thing to repeat a workout. So if week 1 was 4 by 10 minutes, you feel good. Week 2, 4 by 10 minutes again, but maybe you change the incline this time. So instead of doing 8, 10, 10, 12, you do 10, 10, 12, 12. Right? So first interval and second interval 10%, third and fourth interval at 12%. So you can mess around with that as well. If you're feeling the fatigue from everything you've been doing, then diminish the amount of volume of intervals. Okay, so again, going down to maybe 36 minutes of total time at that intensity. So 3 by 12 minutes. And here again, depending on how you're feeling, maybe first interval 8%, second interval 10%, last interval 12%. But again, based it on how you're feeling, how you're reacting to the incline, how the body's reacting, how it's recovering, these are all things to consider. But this we're basically looking at those that are doing larger volume. In other words, if you're spending more time at the threshold intensity, then we do want to kind of diminish over the block. Some people do up to 6 weeks in a threshold block. That's great. Again, being in consideration of diminishing the not only the volume of the workouts, but sometimes the volume of the weekly either time or mileage, right? Depending on the fatigue level that's present. Okay, so things to consider there. We've talked about metrics in the past that allow you to see, how are you recovering, right? You can look and see, how are your paces at that intensity? Are they feeling harder? Are they looking harder based on heart rate? If we see these, if resting heart rate isn't coming down, if your HRV is showing signs of too much stress, then all good signs that you're doing too much. And so, diminish either the intensity or the volume of the week, or both. Okay, so be very cautious when doing these intervals, that you're not doing too much and increasing volume too much. Okay. All right. Now, some supplemental work. You've kind of seen in my training that I've included some supplemental work, and these are all great things to include. So, what I really suggest is increasing your strength, okay? And that can come in multiple forms. Running is the application of force. The stronger that our muscles are, the more application of force we're able to provide and push into the ground, the faster we're able to go. So strength training, Strength training is a key here. And I've had Coach Will on. He talked about plyometrics. I think plyometrics and strength training are a great complement to anybody that's looking to do uphill running. It strengthens the muscles. It increases our capacity to recover. So, lots of advantageous benefits that come along with strength training. So I'm a huge advocate of strength training and plyometric work. It's great to seek professional help. Make sure you're lifting properly and doing the correct lifts. That's not my forte, but I will say, like, having Will in my corner, it just gives me so much more confidence that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and doing it correctly. So, great things there. You'll see on Strava, I've also added the Stairmaster. The Stairmaster has been a tremendous welcome addition. I found one, the story I've told in the past, I found one for $125 on Facebook Marketplace, and it's really a game changer. I can feel my legs getting stronger and stronger. I'm able to push down those stairs at a higher level, if you will. The levels, obviously, on mine, the lower the level, the more resistance it creates. I started out at 20 minutes at a level 11. Okay, so a higher level. I'm now doing 30 minutes at level 7. Right, so I've increased 4 levels over just a few weeks because I can feel the strength coming about. Again, not starting with a lot of time. I'm building as I feel the capacity, the ability to go longer, I increase the amount of time that I'm doing it. So I went from 20 to 25 to now 30. And again, same thing with the levels. Once I felt like I was, able to push the pedals down against the resistance a lot easier, I increased the level, or in this case, decreased the level to make it harder, more resistance. Okay, so Stairmaster has been an extremely welcome addition. It's increasing my strength. Scott Johnston talks about muscular endurance. It increases muscular endurance. It's a fascinating principle. This muscular endurance. If you haven't had a chance to read his book, Training for the Uphill Athlete, highly suggested. There's a lot of principles in there. He reinforces a lot of the things that I'm actually saying here today. Fantastic book. A lot of good stuff in that book. So I encourage you to read that. The other thing that I would encourage you to always incorporate within your training, no matter what the block is hill strides. I think hill strides are fantastic. They are speed work in the skies. They are also strength work. Okay. So hill strides, and I've done whole episodes on hill strides. So you can go back and listen to some of those episodes and what I talk about with hill strides. So I encourage you to go back and check out those. Okay. As I kind of stated, I'm just going to input in summation. Watch your metrics. Watch your heart rate. Watch your resting heart rate. Watch your HRV. Watch your paces. Make sure you are recovering. That is the biggest thing. We are not going to make gains. We are not going to see improvements. You should be seeing improvements. You should be seeing your paces come down on these same workouts at the same intensity, right, that you're doing. You should see that you're getting further up the hill. You should see that your paces are faster. Okay, you should see that your heart rate is remaining in the same spot, and these other variables are increasing. All right. If you're not, again, consider: am I doing too much? Is there too much volume? Is there too much intensity? Right. Have the wherewithal to take a step back. And if you don't know, then reach out to somebody who does. Right. Reach out to a coach. Ask. What do you see? Can you help me? Those are the moments where it's gone beyond your capacity. And sometimes we need that extra set of eyes to look at your training and say, yes, you're doing it right. Okay. So be careful out there. That's a big message, is be careful out there. If you start feeling any twinges, problems, things that, are not normal, seek professional medical counseling, right? And that may be going to see a sports orthopedist. Okay. I think there is a wide gambit, but in order to get a proper clinical diagnosis, please see a doctor. Okay. I've heard of way too many misdiagnoses that have caused more problems than they were worth because they did not see true doctors' help. Okay. I trust a vast majority of of medical advice coming from other people other than sports orthopedists. But if there is a true acute problem, then that's really the solution, is to see a sports orthopedist. If it's something that's it's very nominal, not of high concern, others are completely fine. And I'm not trying to bash any type of medical professional. I just want to make sure you're seeking the right medical help. So again, know the severity of what's going on and know who you should go to see. That conversation, I say sports orthopedist, but it may be a conversation that you have with your primary care physician, and they're like, yes, you probably should go see, a sports orthopedist. Okay. So that kind of wraps up that conversation. I know there was a lot in there, a lot of information. I hit you pretty hard with a lot of different numbers, facts, everything that came with this episode. So please check out the show notes. A lot of notes in there to help you set this up. If you feel overwhelmed by this and want some guidance, please reach out to me for coaching. Love to have that conversation. You can reach out to me through any of my platforms. You can see those in the show notes as well. Happy to have these conversations and go through this. There is a lot to this, and I'm happy to have this episode. I'm happy to kind of go through this stuff, and there's pieces of training that you want me to kind of pick apart and go through how I program. Please reach out. Let me know. I'll do other podcast episodes. Really, I'm here to help you and your running, in whichever way it comes, either be it through the podcast and talking through some of these things, or if it is through coaching. So happy to do it. I am a resource here. As I said, I'll be racing this weekend. I'm super excited for that. I'll be doing the 8K for Shamrock on Saturday and then the marathon on Sunday. Just really looking forward to being out there. Just grateful for the opportunity to do this. My daughter is racing at the Adidas Indoor Nationals. She's racing the 800 and the mile. So excited for her as well. Been helping my son out. He's kind of had a return to running, which is fantastic. We've got him up to consecutive 60-mile weeks, which is the most mileage he's done in his life. So excited to see him getting back to it. Excited also for him to kind of get back with his team and train with them and start getting some workouts in with them. So he's doing great out there at the University of Portland. Super proud of him. Of course, super proud of my daughter for all her efforts. And just really really busy time right now with outdoor track. It's super fun, but I'm so looking forward to getting out there and being a part of the the racing community again. Super excited for June. We'll be talking more and more about the races coming up for the Rocky Mountain Slam. A lot of different logistics taking place right now, and figuring out how to manage travel and just the logistics of these 5 races that I plan on doing. So we'll be talking more and more about that, as well as more of these training principles and concepts that will help you and your running. So thank you all. Thank you for being a part of this podcast. Thanks for listening. I really encourage you, reach out if you have questions, and I thank you all for your comments and constant support. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Running is life.